Hogwarts, rising as Harry's twin with power. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 171. Revoke his privileges. Harry's instincts came true. Snape suddenly looked at Dumbledore and said, "Headmaster, perhaps we should take our suspicious eyes off Peter Potter's body and put it on the famous Harry Potter." Harry's heart lifted. Darren opened his mouth to defend Harry. But Snape glared at him. Some people still don't talk, and their suspicions have not been cleared. Of course, I'm going to talk about Harry Potter now. The appearance of Harry Potter is actually more questionable. Why did they go to the corridor above? And why don't they attend Halloween feast? Harry and Ron scrambled to say why, and they even said, there are hundreds of ghosts out there, and they can certainly testify. Then why are you going up the hallway? Because I also heard that voice that Darren heard, Harry said hurriedly, but Snape shook his head and gloated. Our Harry Potter is clearly a liar. Maybe he didn't hear that voice at all. He just heard some silly boy talking to himself and guessed something, so he used the silly boy to do this kind of thing. His intentions were, maybe it was to expel the stupid boy, or to let the stupid boy be locked up in Azkaban. In this way, there will be no one to stop the great Harry Potter from coming to the fore. I didn't. Harry was furious. He knew Snape was uneasy and kind. He didn't say he was lying. He was deliberately provoking his relationship with Darren. When did he think Darren was getting in the way? Darren was so good to him every time, and he wasn't a wolf's heart and dog lung. How could he not like Darren? This is his twin brother, his dearest relative. Snape did it on purpose. Okay, Professor Snape, I believe in my brother, and my brother won't harm me. Darren was firmly on Harry's side. Harry smiled happily, but Snape was just like him. He sneered, then Potter, you tell me, obviously you have so many opportunities, you can say that you heard that voice before going upstairs. Why would you rather watch your poor brother get beaten and you wouldn't admit it? After coming in, so long of silence, you still don't speak. Let everyone doubt Darren Porter. Why didn't you say at that time that you could hear certain sounds? Harry didn't know how to explain it. Because he hadn't told Darren that he could hear the voices, he had told Ron and Hermione. Ron said that hearing voices that no one else could hear in the wizarding world was a bad thing. So he has been afraid to say, I forgot that, Harry said slyly. Snape laughed. He looked at Dumbledore and exhorted in a triumphant voice, Headmaster, I think Potter is not telling the truth, and perhaps some of his privileges can be revoked. For example, the Quidditch team. All right, Harry understood. Snape was jealous of him giving Gryffindor Quidditch a title. Oh, Severus, you can cancel everything else, but this kid Quidditch didn't make a mistake, Professor McGonagall said hurriedly. In fact, she also thought Harry wasn't telling the truth. But if this child can be locked up, how can Quidditch be abolished? Well, Severus, as long as they are not convicted, these children are innocent, Dumbledore said firmly. Snape was furious. Filch said even more angrily, and my cat is petrified. Cats can be saved, there are mandras in the school, and when they are mature, they can be equipped with potions. Darren, what's wrong? Dumbledore looked at Darren in a gentle tone. Darren looked into his eyes. Finding that he had no intention of taking the gods, he quickly and obediently said, Headmaster Dumbledore, I asked Paggy to develop some new antidotes before, and there is still a little left. No, Darren, you don't understand what I mean. This matter has been known to many students, and it will go out. If you use your antidote, then you are blatantly breaking the law. Dumbledore looked at Filch and said in a slightly angry tone, if the matter doesn't make a big deal out of it, then there's no problem using an antidote. But there was no way. Our janitor, Mr. Filch, made a big fuss about it, blatantly beating students at school, and also using knives. Argus, maybe I should inform you of one thing, you're expelled. No, Filch let out a cry of pain. Hogwarts was his home. Where are you going to let me go? Filch cried. Although he cried hard, no one sympathized with him. Except for Darren. No way. He also had to brush Filch's favorability. This long-term mission also has a premium bloodline lottery too. So he hurriedly stopped in front of Filch and said, Professor Dumbledore, Mr. Filch is not actually a blatant beating of students, because that is my permission. We are in. Fighting, yes, fighting. As for the knife in the back. That's just an apple. Mr. Filch made people conjure, although frightening, but indeed fake. Ding, father plus 100. Ding, father plus 80. Ding, father plus 50. Ding. Darren stuttered and defended Filch. He poked Filch quietly, expecting him to nod quickly. He can't work alone. However, Filch just looked at him in a daze and finally cried bitterly. Darren had no choice but to try and say, Professor, what I said is true. Episode 172. There is murder in her eyes. Snape looked blankly at the boy in front of him. In front of this child, he really can't control his emotions. Really so kind. Even if everything he just said is a lie, it is not angry at all, but full of pain for him. Obviously, he was beaten by Filch and almost stabbed by Filch, but he was so tolerant. saw the boy cast a rescue look at him. Snape pursed his lips. What gave the boy the illusion that he would help him? Snape glared at him and told him not to be whimsical. Dumbledore's every move had his deep meaning. How could he possibly change it? But looking at the boy's expectant eyes, he still showed a sarcastic smile and said, "Since the parties are not prosecuted, then I think Dumbledore should not have dismissed a person casually. Stupid little cub. He won't forget all the pain of people beating him, right? Maybe he can also beat up the cub one day and give him a long memory?" Dumbledore laughed. His previous serious expression had disappeared, replaced by the tolerance and pleasure in his blue eyes. "Oh, dear child, you certainly have the right to decide to stay with Mr. Filch, and it is up to you. Of course, Argus, I guess that's a lesson for you, right?" Dumbledore asked with a smile. Filch nodded repeatedly, and he looked at Darren with tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Darren, I was really crazy before. I should have thought long ago that a child like you would never have done such a thing." Darren looked at Filch's favorability. All of a sudden, it was 75. It seems that it was a great decision to keep Filch at Hogwarts. And Filch also made up his mind. He looked at Darren and assured, "Darren, you can rest assured, if the next time your brother Harry Potter violates the school rules, I will secretly release him. Cough, I'll punish him fiercely." Mr. Filch winked at Darren. There was also a drop of disgusting snot on his big nose. "But it makes people look much more cute. That's love. Boy, I want you to remember this feeling. By the way, Severus, this potion is bothering you." Dumbledore was preparing to give the task to Snape. Unfortunately, he was interrupted by Lockhart. "Headmaster, you better leave it to me. I'm so good at this potion that I can boil it while I sleep. I suppose the potion's professor at the school is me, right?" Snape said unhappily. He wanted this straw bag to boil the potion. He was afraid that it was not boiled well, and this straw bale was falsely accused of being a problem with Darren's potion formula. Lockhart also wanted to refute it, but looking at Snape's murderous face, he shut up. In the middle of the night, Harry and Darren walked them out of the office. "Darren, I'm sorry, my brother didn't protect you. What happened to your arm?" Harry pulled Darren in guilt. Each time it was Darren who thought about how to help him. And he caused trouble for Darren every time. "It's all right." Darren smiled and saw that Harry didn't believe it, and he hurried to let Harry look at his shoulder. "Look. I recovered so fast that I just hadn't recovered well before, and I forgot to apply a healing spell to myself," he said with some chagrin, apparently embarrassed to let Harry see it. "If you have a healing spell, don't go to Filch's office to clean up. I had no idea. If I knew, I would never let you do it, and you would give him a hand to wipe the table." "Are you a wizard?" Harry said somewhat angrily. Darren lowered his head in embarrassment and said, "Mr. Filch hates magic. I just want to help my brother. I'm sorry. You. It's the brother who is sorry for you, and the brother doesn't say you anymore." Harry lowered his head in resignation. He shouldn't have said Darren. Darren was so distressing every time. And Darren was all for him. Maybe he's really going to have to make less trouble in the future, but he didn't know why. The thing was that he liked to find him. "Alas, Darren, go back to sleep." Harry pushed Darren back. He walked with Ron and Hermione to Gryffindor, and on the way he asked with some doubt, "What is the Chamber of Secrets? What other heirs are there? What is this?" Ron shook his head. He didn't quite understand either. Bill had told him that Hogwarts had a Chamber of Secrets, but whether it's true or false is not clear, let alone what is in it. The next few days, there was talk everywhere in the school about the Chamber of Secrets and the heir. Because of what Filch and Snape had said to Darren, some people at the school had begun to suspect that Darren had done it, because he's a Slytherin, and he's the younger brother of the famous Harry Potter, and he also has the ability to do this kind of thing. On Darren's way to class, they even wanted to block Darren, but every time they tried to find something to do, the second-year Slytherin prefect looked at them with a cold expression. Those eyes contained a murderous spirit that made people shudder when they saw them. Some of them even suspected that this Miss Cassandra Vore had killed many people. "There's murder in her eyes. I once saw a murderer," Justin said to the people around him. He was a child from a Muggle family. Once wanted to go to Eton College. As a result, a letter of acceptance was received from Hogwarts. With a unique intuition, he sensed that Darren was definitely the heir to Hogwarts. Even that cat was petrified by Darren. The kindness that Darren usually shows is actually his disguise. "I've read the book, and the mysterious man has also performed very well during this school, and I think that Darren Porter is going to take this road." Justin bragged about it in the library. Harry even tried to go up and clean up the guy, but was pulled by Darren. "Okay, brother, I don't care about that, you know, I just want you to be good." But even so, his eyes still showed darkness. Obviously, he also felt sorry for such rumors. Episode 173, Perverted Spicy, Fly-like Feeling. Darren's pretense of grief lasted only half a day, because in the afternoon, Justin was locked up by Professor McGonagall. Confinement was held until midnight. And I don't know if Justin is a runner. As he crossed the steps, he suddenly rolled down the stairs and was trampled and broke by Madame Pomfrey, who happened to be passing by there. Ron came over to tell them the good news. He laughed badly. "I heard that he had been scolded miserably by Madame Pomfrey, who asked him why he had gone to that stairwell. There were precious herbs that were used to treat Lady Lorith, so Madame Pomfrey suspects that he wants to steal the herbs and asks him if the Chamber of Secrets was opened by him." After all, he got there very early that day. I knew this man was saying bad things about Darren, and sooner or later, he would be punished. Oh Darren, you can't be so kind. He says bad things about you like that, and we'll laugh at him and he'll be okay, shall we? Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary task. Stop Ron's ridicule of Justin and visit Justin, and when you visit, please say, I really just came to visit you, no bad intentions. Ding, after the mission, get Tom Riddle's eyes. Will the host take the task? Pick up. No, Ron, we can't do that. The classmates have to love each other. Why don't we visit Justin tonight? He came out of the Muggle world, and now he has been wrongfully accused of being the heir, and he must be very lonely, so let's comfort him. His words touched Harry and the three of them. They decided to finish their classes in the evening and visit Justin. It doesn't matter if you come back late. Because Mr. Filch had become lovely, he was now gentle with Darren and brought Darren a puff last time and sent it to the library. However, Darren and the three of them suspect that Filch is trying to pursue Mrs. Pins, the librarian of the library. Finish your meal in the evening. The three of them went to the school doctor's office. They saw Justin lying alone in his hospital bed. One of his legs was bandaged. Darren pulls out the BB Dobbies he has prepared specifically for Justin. This is what he told Paggy Justin in the afternoon, and said that he was going to take the BB Dow beans to see Justin, and Paggy solemnly sent it, and said that Darren must send the latest version of the BB Dodo beans to Justin's hands. Used to express Darren's comfort, Darren secretly guessed that this was a variety of strange tastes, if not the taste of dung, so he smiled and brought the multi-flavored beans to Justin. It's just that Justin doesn't appreciate it at all, and he almost jumps up in fright. He pulled out his wand and pointed it at Darren and said, Are you trying to kill me? I tell you, Mrs. Pomfrey is in the school doctor's office. Let her know that you are the heir and she will certainly give you over to Dumbledore, but... Before, Headmaster Dumbledore had already said that I had been wronged. Darren showed a sad expression. He tried to get the BB beans to Justin, and said very well, I won't lie to you, Headmaster Dumbledore is the greatest wizard of the century, and if I have a problem, he will surely arrest me. I really came to visit you, without any bad intentions. Eat some BB multi-flavored beans, which is a new flavor, and I specifically found someone to send it. Ding. Congratulations to the host for getting Tom Riddle's gaze. Tom Riddle's gaze, immune to Tom Riddle's soul attack. These days at Hogwarts, Tom Riddle learned through the basilisk that you are also the heir to Slytherin. To this his eyes noticed you. Darren shook his head wordlessly. He knew that the reward given by the system was strange. Being noticed by a Horcrux is also boring enough. Or look at Justin, interesting. Justin sat down half convinced. He opened the BB Do beans that Darren had given him. He found that the box of BB Dodo beans was not opened at all, which meant that Darren had no chance to steal the box of BB Dodo beans. Maybe Darren doesn't have a bad eye? I eat one, and if I have a problem, then you did it. Justin vigilantly picked one inside and put it in his mouth. Darren noticed that it was a bright red bean. Well, this seems to be a heavy flavored product made by BB multi-flavored beans. Perverted spicy, and the entrance is melted. Enjoy the feeling of flying. Sure enough, Justin's face suddenly became extremely ugly. He called out loudly to Madame Pomfrey. Madam, Darren Porter is going to kill. Justin shouted like a pig. Madame Pomfrey thought something was wrong with him, and who knew that he had just eaten a Bibido bean and began to shout like this. But I ate his multi-flavored beans, and I was so hot that I almost exploded in my mouth, and I thought it was a bomb. Justin tried to argue, but he had no proof. After all, the bean had entered his mouth. The other beans Madame Pomfrey had all been tested with their wands without any problems. If I find out again that you're talking nonsense and deliberately looking for fault here, I'll break your other leg too, and you know I can do it. At this time, the new heavy flavor BB multi-flavored bean had not yet been released, so Mrs. Pomfrey did not know that it was a perverted and spicy bean. It's normal to feel that way. She heard Justin say that it was so hot that she thought Justin was pretending. Darren, if I had to say, you shouldn't leave him alone, this guy has persecution paranoia. You came over and you must have been wronged by him. Madame Pomfrey comforted Darren. Mist flashed in Darren's green eyes, but he immediately regained his look. It's okay, I just heard that Justin was injured, so wanted to come and see. Since he hates me, I'll go. Darren sighed. In his arms, he held the BB Dodo beans that he had just given to Justin. Because Justin suspected that he had put poison in it, he asked him to take it away. Otherwise, he'd be rude. As a little holy father, of course, Darren could only take the BB Do beans away with red eyes, and expressed sympathy for this benevolent brother. It is estimated that this benevolent brother may not even be able to come out of the school clinic this semester. Affected by Halloween, in addition to Justin has been in and out of the school doctor's office, there is Ginny. Before Halloween, Ginny had a cold. She was given several refreshing potions by her brothers. Darren saw the effects of the refreshing potion from her, and then decided to cover himself tightly and definitely not catch a cold. During this time, Ginny became a little unrefreshed, and she seemed to be very uneasy because of what happened to Mrs. Lorith. Darren knew that she was somewhat aware of what the diary had manipulated her, but he certainly shouldn't know now, so he was all cold when Ginny had a cold, and kept boiling cold medicine, refreshing medicine, and tonic for Ginny. Ginny was about to get nosebleeds before he stopped emitting his fatherly light. Episode 174, The Descendants of Slytherin? In addition to something that had gone wrong with Ginny lately, Hermione had become a little strange lately. She started running around the school library constantly. Hold a variety of tomes and watch it all night. Darren wakes up every morning to have more knowledge. This is ample testimony to the lady's recent diligence. Oh my god, what the hell are you looking for? One day, Ron finally couldn't help asking. Hermione glared at him and then said, "You don't care about the so-called Chamber of Secrets at all. Didn't you all use your brains when so much happened that day?" "Oh, I'm not talking about you, Darren, you've worked hard. I'm talking about these two brainless guys." Hermione blushed and praised Darren. Darren was a little embarrassed to put down the storybook in his hand. "It's just a storybook, and sometimes I look at it and change my brain." Hermione comforted Darren. Ron was stunned, but he immediately looked at Hermione with a hippie smile and said, "Hermione, borrow your composition and copy it with Harry. We are working on it now." Harry nodded vigorously. "Dreaming. The professor has given you several days to write essays. What about you? Just know how much Darren wrote?" He filled the whole piece of parchment. Hermione pointed angrily at Harry and Ron's lesson. Ron complained Darren's previous writing was particularly ugly, but later he wrote it very well after practicing. But in addition to looking good, he now writes very large letters, and if there are 10 lines written on his parchment, I will call him Daddy. What's wrong with the 10 lines? 10 lines are also the result of Darren's efforts, and you haven't even written 10 lines. Hermione angrily slapped the book on the table in front of Ron. It startled Ron. Darren was a little embarrassed to hand over his composition, and he said obediently, "Copy me, you will remember to write it later. As for the big characters, I don't know, since I changed the handwriting, I have always been used to writing big. In order for the professor to understand, I can only write so much, and I will try to correct it in the future." Ron took Darren's composition. He was a little suspicious that Darren was talking nonsense. Just to be lazy and write less. Because of the whole piece of parchment, he and Harry had written the letters large enough to write less, but they also needed to write 20 lines. But Darren was able to write letters to the point of only 10 lines, and it was obvious how big he was writing the letters. But thinking about Darren's usual performance, Ron still shook his head and waved away his own excessive conjecture. No way, Darren wasn't like them. He picked up Darren's notebook. "Keep your eyes on the contents of the above. The words are beautiful, the writing is beautiful, and the 10 lines of writing make him sigh involuntarily. No wonder every time Darren wrote this, those teachers would give it perfect. Is this talent?" Only he put Darren's composition back. No wonder Hermione didn't stop them from copying Darren's composition. There is really no way to copy. Darren writes such a beautiful sentence, and the professor will praise Darren for using good words. But when they write sentences like this, the professor will ask them where they copied it. I urge you to write well." Hermione ended the conversation with a high-pitched voice. "Then I was immersed in the search for various books. Harry, they didn't quite understand. It wasn't until the History of Magic class that they knew what Hermione was preparing. The History of Magic class was taught by Professor Binns. Professor Binns is a ghost professor. It is said that when he went to class one day, he forgot to bring his body and became a ghost. His History of Magic classes were so boring, and tedious that even Hermione would run away in his classes. Except for Darren. That's what Harry admired most about Darren. No matter how boring the course was, Darren was able to keep up with the professor's train of thought. Every time the professor looked over, he could nod thoughtfully. Although no one knew what he had in mind, he must have thought of something more important. This is very admirable to everyone. Even Professor Binns liked Darren. When he took the exam last year, Professor Binns gave Darren a correction, and he didn't even read the answers, so he gave Darren a perfect score. Of course, don't talk about this now. Now it's Hermione. In the middle of Professor Binns' class, Hermione suddenly stood up and asked, "Professor, do you know anything about the Chamber of Secrets? My subject is the history of magic. I study the facts, the things that have happened," Professor Binns said in a dry, breathless voice. He then went on to give a lecture. However, Hermione did not give up at all. She said directly, "The professor probably doesn't know that inside the castle there are rumors that Darren is the heir, and they all say that he opened the Chamber of Secrets. Last time, there was another student, named Justin, who almost pulled out his wand and cast a spell on Darren when he came to visit him. You don't want to watch Darren just be wronged like this, do you? What's more, legends are all facts. Is that so? Darren?" Professor Binns's tone finally changed a little. He looked at Darren. Darren shook his head hurriedly, and he stuttered a little. "Hermione is exaggerating. Justin was just a little scared of me. Not enough to cast a spell on me, and the timing of my appearance at that time was indeed too clever, and it was normal to be suspected." "That's true," Professor Binns said angrily. "I have never seen such a student, and the secret room is all nonsense. He looked at all the students, and even Darren suddenly smiled as he looked at him. Well, since you know, I'll tell you that this school was. So you get it? Inside the rumor, the Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets could only be opened by Slytherin's descendants. Darren is a descendant of the Potters, and he is simply not a descendant of Slytherin. Professor Bin said a lot to clarify for Darren that he was not the heir. Darren looked at him gratefully. However, my heart is a little weak. Although the Chamber of Secrets was not opened by him, he may also be a descendant of Slytherin? Episode 175. I like you too. After class, Ron and Hermione discuss the sorting house. Salazar Slytherin is so perverted that he even made a Chamber of Secrets and wanted to kill all wizards who were not pure-blooded. It's crazy, I can assure you, that even a family like Malfoy is not completely pure blood, and if we hadn't intermarried with the hemp wizards, they would have gone extinct. So, fortunately, the sorting hat put me in Gryffindor in the first place, and if I got to Slytherin, I would definitely roll up the futon and go home. Oh, sorry Darren, I was wrong, I didn't take your feelings into account, but I dare say that you must be Gryffindor, or Ravenclaw, or worst Hufflepuff, and absolutely not Slytherin. The sorting hat should have been crazy at the time. Ron cursed and swore an oath. Darren shook his head shyly. Slytherin's classmates are still very good. Salazar Slytherin was a very early man, and his ideas are not the same as those of Slytherin now. Now Slytherin's classmates are very friendly. Of course, I also asked Mr. Sorting Hat to go to Gryffindor, but Mr. Sorting Hat told me that I was too courageous. And he said that he was afraid that I would go into Slytherin and might die because I was too courageous. I kept saying to be closer to my brother, and it sent me to Slytherin. It says that Slytherin has a lot of classes to take with Gryffindor, and that it taught me Slytherin's ambition and scheming. Ron was stunned. Then he understood the intent of the sorting hat. After thinking about it, he actually felt that the sorting hat was done quite right. Indeed, Darren was too courageous. He always took all the bad things on himself. Even to block the gun for others, to block the spell, even Filch's unreasonable teasing, he went up to block Harry's face. And that's just the result of splitting Darren and Slytherin, if you mess with them in Gryffindor. So many Gryffindors are in trouble. Even if Darren is exhausted, he can't be busy. Just his twin brother was enough for Darren to be overwhelmed. Well, I think the sorting hat is right, Darren, it's time for you to change your character. If you learn a little Slytherin scheming, I will definitely raise my hands and feet to agree, Ron said exaggeratedly. He also pushed Harry. Just don't know why. Harry's face is a little bad. He has not been involved in their topic. Darren had intended to use his father's light to ask him, but the next second he realized that they had arrived at the place where Lady Lorith had been petrified the last time. There is a chair here. It was Filch's chair. Filch thought the guy who petrified Lolith might come back, so he might be able to catch the guy. Then wake up Mrs. Loris early. Darren, they lay on the ground around them in an intense search. There are some burnt marks here, and some spiders are crawling out along a wire next to the glass. Ron was startled. He was most afraid of spiders. This also stems from the fact that when he was 3 years old, the twins turned his teddy bear into a giant spider, but to observe, they still looked for it nearby. Until, they found a golden door. Ron grabbed the doorknob. The doorknob immediately became hot. It's a girl's bathroom. He shook his head and said somewhat unhappily, can't go in. There's definitely no one in there. It's the territory of the Weeping Myrtle, Hermione said, and then she opened the door. Crying Myrtle? Of course Darren knew about the girl. He was killed by Voldemort when he first released the basilisk, and then the girl's soul remained here, but now he hadn't touched Myrtle. So he looked at Hermione doubtfully. Well, Darren, you don't pay attention to these things. She's the ghost of the girl's bathroom. Something strange about the personality, Hermione said with some confusion. Still, she took Harry with her inside. Seeing that Darren was a little embarrassed to come in, she covered her mouth and giggled. Well, Darren, don't be shy. There's no one else here to go to the bathroom. Darren had to throw away the scraps in his mind, and then walked in frankly. As soon as he entered, he saw a female ghost of pearl white. The female ghost sat on the water pump above the toilet. She glanced at Darren and then said shyly, "Ah, I know you. There are several girls holding your pictures and discussing what Christmas gifts to give you. I told them that most people like candy. Do you like it?" Case solved. He said why the girls at Hogwarts liked to give him candy. He had a lot of candy, and finally let Paggy take it and distribute it to many children in the wizard's hospital. It turned out that this girl did it. Still, he said with an embarrassed expression, "Thank you, I like those candies." "No thanks, I like you too," Myrtle said shyly. Harry noticed that Hermione's face had a moment of viciousness, but as soon as he blinked, he saw that Hermione was still the same as before. "It's weird. We're here to ask you, did you see anything here on Halloween? Because there was a cat petrified not far from your door that day." "I don't know, Peeves is so fierce, he laughed at me. I came here trying to kill myself." Before she could finish speaking, she heard Hermione coldly ask, "Do you remember that you were dead?" "You're too much, woohoo," Myrtle cried and flushed into the flush toilet. Darren asked worriedly, "Is she okay? Do you need me to go to the professor to help her?" Ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 100, ding, father plus 60, for Holy Father values, and a 60 Holy Father value added to it. Obviously Myrtle has not left. Leave her alone, she's just that. "Oh, Darren, it's not that I'm rude, it's that she sometimes likes to have people talk to her like that, or she'll feel bad." "Is that so?" Darren was stunned, but he had been pushed out by Ron. "Of course that's the case, can you still not believe Hermione?" Episode 176, Eavesdropping on the Father's Value. Darren was pulled out of the girls' bathroom by Harry and Ron, and apparently, none of them had a crush on Myrtle. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary task. After Percy came out, he suddenly blocked in front of Percy and looked ahead. When he saw the basilisk's eyes, he made a distant appearance and sat on the ground. Ding, after the mission is completed, you will get Percy's apology. Will the host receive the task? Access, basilisk. It is also an important role in the original book. In many fanfiction, most believe that this is Salazar left to improve the bloodline for future generations. After all, Salazar speaks snake language, which is likely to be the product of fusion of blood. Darren remembered his own bloodline again and suddenly felt a little ashamed. It is said that people are all kinds of high-end bloodlines. He only has all kinds of strange bloodlines. The system gave him the bloodline and made his Lily Mother Wind comment constantly suffer. Obviously, it was the reward of the system, and finally it was all pushed on his Lily Mother. Look at the other person's system, and then look at his system. System, aren't you ashamed? Unfortunately, the system is not only not ashamed, but also feels that he is making unreasonable trouble. Darren sighed. Then I saw Percy suddenly coming out of the corner. He first showed a shocked expression, then suddenly blocked in front of Percy, his eyes forward, and then saw the brass eyes. Interestingly, if the basilisk's gaze can't hurt people, it feels quite interesting, because there is no wanton killing intent in it, but pure curiosity. Just looked at him like that, and then before disappearing, whispered, "Teared. Tear him up. So hungry, heck, this guy still knows to cover for him?" Darren was still worried that the basilisk would reveal his identity, but Harry heard it and could not explain it. Who knew this guy would be very good? "Darren, it's that voice." Harry screamed excitedly, and even rushed to Darren's side, but Darren waved his wand and he couldn't see clearly. "I didn't see anything in front of me at all. Hermione, undo the spell for your brother." "Forget it, I'll solve it in a moment." Darren slowly fell to the ground and said with a pale face, "Ding, congratulations to the host for getting Percy's apology." Percy's apology. The Weasleys have increased their favorability with their hosts by 20%. Percy, a Weasley's model student, once suspected that the host was the heir. When the host is in his way, although he does not know what is happening, he knows that the host is a good person. The Weasley's favorability? Darren felt that this really didn't need to be improved. The Weasleys treated him like sons to him. No, it's better than kissing a son. However, they have already got their hands on them, and they will not return to them. So, still have to keep loading. Darren struggled to get up from the ground. The bloodless appearance made people suspect that he would fall in the next second. However, he was still supported by Hermione and stood firm. "Darren?" Harry couldn't see it and could only ask worriedly, "It's all right, brother." Darren looked at Harry and tried to wave his wand in front of him, but there was no response, because he acted as if he had no strength or magic at all. "Darren? What the hell is going on?" Harry circled anxiously in place, and he even wanted to see how Darren was. "Just because I can't see, I can only grab my hair and can't do anything to inquire." "It's all right, brother. Wait for me." Darren closed his eyes, then waved his wand, and this time the magic worked, and Harry regained his light. But Darren was completely out of strength, and he leaned almost completely on Hermione's body. "Darren, you hurry up, how did it come to this?" Harry and Hermione helped Darren and found him a chair that seemed to be Filch's. Darren was a little disgusted, but thinking about his personality, he still sat up with a pale face. After waiting for a long time, Darren opened his eyes in Harry's anxious gaze and said, "Brother, the heir to Slytherin, I don't know who it is, but I know that Lady Loris's petrification should be related to the creature just now." Darren pursed his lips. He looked at Ron, Hermione, and Percy, and said solemnly, "Brother can hear that voice, so you can hide, but you must be careful. If you don't go out, don't run around. I don't know what kind of thing it is, but I see its eyes." The brass eyes stared at me for a moment, and I felt like my soul was about to be sucked away. But you know, I have a huge amount of power in my body, so in the instant just now, all my strength was sucked out. All the power is only to resist the power that is almost pulling away my soul. If you are here, you may die. Of course, it is also possible that I was making a fuss. After all, Mrs. Lawless saw that the eyes were not dead, but were petrified. Maybe Mrs. Loris didn't look those eyes straight? Darren scratched her hair in confusion, apparently not quite understanding why Mrs. Loris hadn't died. But in the end he said, "I'll send you back to Gryffindor, and then I'll go to Headmaster Dumbledore, or Professor Snape. I'm going to make things clear and can't let other people get hurt." Ding, father plus 100. Ding, father plus 100. Ding, father plus 100. Ding, father plus 80. Ding, father plus 60. Hey, how can there be 5 father values? Darren glanced at Percy and suddenly remembered that this guy seemed to be in love with Penelope. In the original book, Harry seems to have disturbed the two of them in love, so Percy rushed out to teach Ron a lesson. Good fellow, even the eavesdroppers have given him the value of the Holy Father. He shook his head helplessly, then got out of his chair. In order to be realistic, he also pretended to have a soft leg, and then he smiled and said, "Let's go. I'll send you back first." In this case, you still wait for the professor to tell me how to do it. Episode 177. The Unattainable Fox. At Darren's insistence, Harry, who did not want to go back, still honestly went back to Gryffindor. Of course, Percy stayed here alone on the grounds that he still had to ask Professor McGonagall to inform him of the matter. Darren suspected that he was going to wait for Penelope to go with him. It seems that Penelope is a little shy and does not want people to see them fall in love together. This is also too shy, when it is fatal, still thinking about love. If Darren hadn't had to take care of the people, he would have wanted to go serious and arrest Penelope and Percy. Let them know that falling in love is simply cruel to dogs. No, early love is not right. However, for the sake of human design, he still pretended that he did not know anything, and went to Dumbledore's office. Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary task, ignoring Harry's tracking and creating an opportunity for them to enter Dumbledore's office. Ding, after the mission is completed, get Voldemort's soul fragment ×1. Does the host receive the task? Hey, Harry, are they stalking? Darren didn't look back. He sensed it for a moment and found nothing. Jokes, he didn't have to ignore at all, because he couldn't feel them at all. How many of these people have gotten smarter, become so powerful? He couldn't even feel the presence of these three. But then the system asked Harry to follow him to Dumbledore's office. For what? Could it be that Dumbledore was going to make some moth for him? There are also systematic rewards. Voldemort's soul fragment. It wouldn't be what he imagined, right? As for Dumbledore, spitting out the true agent, taking the mind of the gods, is definitely this set. After all, Dumbledore should have discovered the Voldemort soul fragment in Harry's head, so it was normal for Harry to be able to speak snake language. But Darren could also understand snake language, which was indeed unimaginable to Dumbledore. So if this had not attracted Dumbledore's attention, he himself would not have believed it. But Dumbledore's suspicions were painless to him, so Darren didn't pause in the slightest, and continued to walk forward. Seems to know nothing about what's going on behind him. No, he really didn't know anything this time. Not at all aware of Harry them. He wondered if the system felt wrong. Dumbledore's office was behind a pair of ugly stone statues, and after Darren tried several passwords, the pair suddenly gave way behind him. Headmaster Dumbledore let you in. Okay, thank you. Darren stood where he was with a grateful look. At this moment, he felt a touch of nothingness and went around him. Well, it's really there. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Voldemort's soul shard ×1. Voldemort's soul shard, the merit creature favorability level is automatically +20 after fusion, and can be removed using 1000 father values, and the reward disappears after unplugging. On the night Lily was tortured, Voldemort, in his ignorance, may have lost a piece of his soul. How can this even lose its soul? This thing is so good to lose? The system sends soul fragments to send soul fragments. Don't talk nonsense. Dumbledore's office was the same as before, but Fawkes has become a feathered look, and the whole looks very good. Fully interpret what is called, yesterday you ignored my love, today you can't climb high with me. Fortunately, Darren had not shown a dislike for Fawkes before. So he happily said hello to Fawkes. Fawkes flapped his wings and landed on his shoulders, rubbing against him before leaving. I'm sorry, Headmaster Dumbledore, I forgot to say hello to you. Ah, Professor Snape is also there, I'm sorry. Darren stroked the feathers on Fawkes's body for a moment, before remembering Dumbledore. Looking back, Dumbledore was smiling and squinting at him. Next to him stood Snape, with a black face. Oh, it's all right, little Darren, no one can resist the charm of Fawkes. Don't know what you came to me for? Of course, you've come just in time, and even if you hadn't come, I wanted Severus to call you over. Darren blinked. This should be true. Dumbledore had Snape here, perhaps discussing his business, but he had obediently told all that he had seen before. You mean you just saw a pair of brass eyes, didn't you? Ding, sensing that the host is being taken by the gods. Does the host forge the memory? Send all that I think to Dumbledore. The boy was ripped out of his heart by Voldemort. The boy lived happily in the burrow. The boy saw that Harry had not been present in Gryffindor, and his heart was frightened and bitter. The fearlessness of the boy when he stood in Percy's way. And those horrible eyes. Just by looking at Darren's memory, Dumbledore could feel the killing intent in it. Darren didn't seem to sense what Dumbledore had done, he just shook his head wearily, and then went on to answer Dumbledore's question. Yes, Headmaster Dumbledore, I have just seen a pair of brass-colored eyes, which are terrible, so I urged Harry to go back to Gryffindor first, and then I'll just come over and inform you. I hope you can get all the students out as little as possible, so that maybe no one will be hurt again, right? I really don't want to see anyone like Mr. Filch collapse again. Ding, Father +100, ding, Father +100, ding, Father +100, ding, Father +80, ding, Father +50. Darren suspected that the least father value might have been contributed by Dumbledore. The old man was as restrained as Slytherin. It was rare to see this old man like Harry them, moved directly to 100. Darren stood obediently in front of Dumbledore, looking at him frankly. This old man didn't know that the regent was finished. Could he let him leave? Just as Darren was thinking about what to eat at noon, Dumbledore finally spoke. He knocked on the table with his wand, and 2 cups of lemon juice appeared on it, and he pushed 1 cup in front of Darren. Just when Darren thought he was going to put on the true agent, he heard Dumbledore say solemnly, "This matter is very serious, very serious." Darren, you did the right thing. Fortunately you told me the first time, so I had some conjecture in my heart. Of course, I will solve this matter with the professors, and at the moment I need to know another thing, that is, your physical problem. Darren, can you tell me if you've ever been out of control? Is that the kind of time when there were evil thoughts? Can you tell me directly? Episode 178. Use the true pill again. Hey, Darren was a little hard to imagine that Dumbledore could believe him just by taking the gods. Aren't you going to use the spit agent again? Didn't Snape all call? Or did he really wrong Dumbledore? This old man is not so suspicious? Darren thought a lot in his mind, but he still made an effort to recall it on the surface. He thought hard for a moment, then shook his head and said, "No, I never thought like that. How could he, a little holy father, have such thoughts?" Ding, sensing that the host is exposed to a new type of truth spitting agent. Is it offset by 500 father values? 500? Didn't it take only 100 before? What kind of ghost is the new type of vomit? He didn't touch anything. Could it be air? Snape improved? He remembered that the original book did not say anything about improvement. But the system did not lie to him. After the system prompted, he felt that his consciousness had begun to become unconscious. Offset with father value, Darren sighed. Or chose to use. He complained in his heart that Snape was annoying. Why couldn't the old version of the truth spit agent be used? Is it to look down on that vomit? When will the old spit stand up? Snape watched as the boy's eyes grew sluggish. A mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Look, the boy had once again misbelieved him, for he had once again offered Dumbledore help. With empty eyes, he walked over to the boy, carefully checked the boy's state, and sure enough, he was easily recruited. The cubs were always so defenseless. I can hear voices that others can't hear, and I dare to speak out casually. How did he not keep saying it like Harry Potter? Even if it aroused the suspicion of others, it was better than saying it to arouse Dumbledore's vigilance. Just thinking about Dumbledore's concern for Darren, Snape also understood that Darren was hiding those things, and he would also be taken by Dumbledore's prey. It is simply irrational to hide your thoughts in front of this great white wizard, but even if the little cub was stupid enough to tell all his secrets, he would still be asked by Dumbledore to use the true pill. Thinking of what Dumbledore had said earlier, Snape sneered. Severus, forgive me for my selfishness, but Darren's performance in Slytherin upsets me. This kid really looks too much like Tom. They're all polite, and yes, Darren isn't that kind of person, and that's what I thought before. Even though Darren left the party early, I held back my doubts until Darren said he could hear that strange sound. Do you know? That night, Tom had left Harry not just that scar, but something else. This resulted in Harry being able to understand some language. Yes, that's the voice, but Darren can understand it too, and you know that when I heard the news, I almost jumped up in shock and forgave me for using the word. I used great perseverance to calm myself down and allow myself to proceed to discuss the petrified case of Mrs. Lollis. Severus, I can't do anything so important. I need your help. Snape eventually agreed to Dumbledore's request. He agreed to give Darren a second dose of true medicine. Thinking of this, Snape's eyes became even more hollow. He looked at Dumbledore sneeringly and said, "About 3 minutes, I hope you are faster. I have made such a little bit of the new spitting agent." It was all for Potter. Snape's expression grew more and more sarcastic. An already fierce face looks even more frightening. "Oh, Severus, take it easy." "Then why not use the same vomit agent as before?" Dumbledore asked doubtfully. Darren, who was watching, also wanted to ask how cheap the previous one was. Well, for Darren Porter, who hadn't been exposed to the wizarding world a year ago, that kind of vomit could easily conceal him. But for him a year later, do you think he, who can make a new version of the antidote, really doesn't know anything about the true agent? All right. Darren sighed. Blame him for being too good. No wonder you use this new type of true agent. Severus, you are the most powerful potions master in recent years. Dumbledore's sincere compliment. But his words were interrupted by Snape. Well, thanks to the Potter cubs who developed a new type of antidote, I got some inspiration from it. He probably didn't think of it. This inspiration can also be used on him. Snape's cold taunts. He looked into Darren's eyes with a particularly hollow look. He seemed to be silent for a moment, then urged Dumbledore, "Headmaster, you better hurry, don't waste my time." "Oh, well, Severus, you're always in such a hurry." Dumbledore laughed, but Snape did not show the slightest good look, and he shrouded himself in a black robe, giving the feeling even more gloomy. "Well, then Darren." After a few tentative inquiries, Dumbledore got to the point. "Darren, do you feel malicious presence around you?" "Malicious?" Darren shook his head. "Nothing. He was so successful at Hogwarts that there could be no malice. This little fool is the evil man standing in front of him, and he probably thinks it's a good man," Snape said sarcastically. He also took a special look at Dumbledore, and it was clear that the evil man was referring specifically to Dumbledore. Dumbledore pretended not to hear the taunts in it, and he continued to ask, "Darren, do you feel that you and Harry are attracted to each other?" "Ah, this?" Dumbledore had homosexual tendencies, so he thought he had too. Darren complained. However, he immediately reacted that Dumbledore suspected that he also had Voldemort's soul fragments in his body, so he asked. "It is said that he does have a Voldemort soul fragment in his body now, and he can still remove it at any time. Do you want to blow 2 sentences? Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host. Now release a temporary task. Say it in an emotionless voice. My brother is my relative, my only relative. I didn't feel my brother's attraction to me. I just wanted to take care of him so that he could grow up safely. My brother always encountered all kinds of dangers, so what happened to my brother would be too extreme. My brother was a savior, and there were a lot of Death Eaters who wanted to kill him, and I had to be more careful. Episode 179. Soul Shard Lottery. Soul Shards Raffle? Is it hard to believe that besides Voldemort, who else has torn his soul apart? And what did he want those people's soul fragments to do? Used as a Horcrux for those people? Ding. Some soul fragments contain autonomous consciousness. The host can communicate, can also block communication, may have unexpected gains. Hey, it's possible. He just didn't know what soul fragments he could touch. Spit out 2 sentences. Darren realized that he must answer Dumbledore's questions as soon as possible. So he was expressionless and said in a dull voice, "There is no attraction between me and my brother. I am just worried that my brother will be hurt, so I will overreact to my brother. My brother is a savior and will always be targeted by all kinds of dangers. The professor and the principal didn't necessarily have to help him all the time, so my brother was left with me. I will help my brother and let him grow up safely." Ding. Congratulations to the host for winning the Soul Shard Lottery ×1. Is the host now in the lottery? Lucky draw try. Ding. The draw starts, the draw ends. Congratulations to the host for receiving the Ariana Dumbledore Soul Shard. Ariana Dumbledore Soul Shard. After fusion, it can increase mana by +50, can be removed using 1000 father points, and after unplugging, the reward disappears. The day Ariana died, she didn't know what was going on, and a piece of soul flew out. She wanders between life and death until she meets her host, where she accidentally lives in. Ariana? He remembered that it seemed to be Dumbledore's sister coming? Darren smacked his tongue. If Dumbledore knew that his sister's soul fragment was with him, would he have torn him down? Yes, it should not. He still believed Dumbledore in this regard. In the future, if Dumbledore found out, he would ask the system to find a way to move the fragments of Ariana's soul to Dumbledore's body. Maybe Dumbledore really didn't want to die, and then it was time to confront Voldemort against Avada. Anyone? Just as Darren was thinking, a small, tender voice sounded in his head. Darren had wanted to answer, but remembering that he was still in the effect of the true agent, and according to his personal design, when he encounters this situation, he will definitely repay the professor and the principal. So don't answer, just don't hear it. But not answering didn't mean he didn't want Ariana to see what her brother had done. Good fellow, this old man has been suspicious of him all day long as such a little holy father. Although he didn't care, he must let his sister know. Thinking about the day when old Dang wasted a lot of effort and took out the soul fragment of Ariana in his mind. Then he was greeted not by his sister's look of miss, but by the look of contempt in Ariana's eyes. That feeling Darren was cool to think about. Brother? Brother is so old? It's ugly. Brother, have I been dead for a long time? But where is this? Who is this boy? How did I get into someone else's body? Ariana said in Darren's mind. After finding out that Darren couldn't hear, she said even more. If it weren't for Darren's good acting skills, he would definitely be unable to help but laugh out loud. Of course, what was more important at this point was Dumbledore's interrogation of him. So he still looked at Dumbledore in a trance. Dumbledore had no idea what had happened to Darren for a moment. He was frowning in thought. Dumbledore, what the hell are you asking? Wouldn't it be that you suspect there is any special affection between the two Potters? Snape said sarcastically. Dumbledore shook his head hurriedly, and he said helplessly, I never thought so. Maybe I asked something wrong, but I was more suspicious. Darren also has something mysterious about him, which causes him to hear the voice. No, no, no. And Severus, don't ask me what that voice is. Maybe you'll know it yourself after a while. I don't want to discuss this. I am thinking, when? Where? Dumbledore stood up suddenly, and then he came to Darren and pressed his wand against Darren's temple. Snape tried to stop it, but was stopped by Dumbledore. Wait, I need to know something. Darren didn't feel any problem, and Dumbledore suddenly stepped back. He shook his head solemnly and said, yes, it was left by the mysterious man. I didn't think wrong, but how could it be? He looked at Darren and then asked solemnly, Darren, have you ever felt that you can feel Voldemort's presence? Can the Dark Lord let a little cub know of his existence? Snape said dismissively, no, no, no. Tom left the thing that would make Harry and Darren feel his presence. This is not something that the mysterious man himself is willing to do, nor is it something he can control. Dumbledore looked at Darren solemnly. Darren understood what he meant. Dumbledore wondered when he had become Voldemort's Horcrux. He was tempted to answer, and as soon as he stepped into the office, he became Voldemort's Horcrux. It even became the Horcrux of old Dang and his sister. Then why didn't Dumbledore perceive Ariana's soul just now? Could it be because Ariana was able to dodge the probe? Darren can see the soul, or the scene in his mind. Voldemort's soul fragment was small, barely conscious, lying motionless. As for the Ariana soul fragment, she hid behind Darren's soul while Dumbledore was investigating. Wouldn't this little sister want to be found by Dumbledore? But without him asking, the nagging Ariana had already said why. Ah, brother is so ugly. Don't be found by your brother. Brother is fierce. When will I see Aberforth? Is Albus still messing around with that Grindelwald? that guy is so annoying. I wonder where Aberforth is. Where is Aberforth? Spray, look at Dumbledore's popularity. Even his own sister did not want to see him. But this little sister is too noisy. System, can you block her first? Ding, has blocked Aliana's voice thing. Episode 180, becomes Voldemort's Horcrux. Dumbledore was ridiculed. Darren then remembered to answer the question for Dumbledore. As for when it became Voldemort's Horcrux, of course, it can't be said that it was just now. He intended to stay until the last few days of last year. The day he and Voldemort were confronted. That day in the eyes of everyone, he was tortured by Voldemort. When Voldemort tortured him, he lost a small piece of soul fragment, which should not be a strange thing, right? So Darren continued to say slowly, I don't know when I will be able to feel Voldemort, but I remember when I was being drilled into the bone. It was as if something had burrowed into my brain, but I was in so much pain that I didn't think about it, Darren said confusedly. Then he saw Snape's angry eyes. He almost pointed his wand at Dumbledore and said, into the brain? Dumbledore, you tell me what the Dark Lord has on Potter Big and Small? That thing can still give the two of them the power of the Dark Lord. Dumbledore, are you making a fool of me? Snape's body was shaking in his forehead. Soul. There are rumors that the soul is in the mind. So the Dark Lord's soul entered the soul of the Big and Small cubs. Horcruxes. Both of them became Horcruxes. Severus, forgive me, but I can assure you that they will all be alive. Dumbledore's solemn assurance. Snape pursed his lips. He knew that the old man in front of him was very powerful, and if anyone could save those two children, then it was only him. He slowly lowered his wand and said in a somewhat tough tone, Dumbledore, I trust you one more time, or I'd rather fire them both and never return to the wizarding world. Oh, Severus, you're too extreme, it's just a small thing. Dumbledore smiled as much as possible, but both he and Snape knew that it wasn't an easy task. But Darren became a Horcrux, something that Dumbledore hadn't even thought of. He had thought that even if the final plan failed, he would be able to give Severus a Darren. It turned out to be like this. It seems that many of his plans may have to be added to Darren. Hopefully Severus won't get too angry. He sighed deeply. He was old and really didn't want to do this kind of thing again, but things never went according to his development. Especially after more Darren, what he is doing now. There is a feeling of exceeding expectations. If he could, he really didn't want Darren to show up at Harry's side. How nice it would have been if he had sent Darren to another magic school. Nor has it become uncontrollable now, but now he just doesn't want to. So, one last question, Darren, do you hate me now? Dumbledore suddenly appeared before Darren's eyes. Darren was stunned. Is this old dang crazy? Why do you want to him? Not only Darren, but even Snape said angrily, Dumbledore, what do you really want to do? No, I'm just asking how little Darren thinks of me. He smiled and stood in front of Darren. Darren suddenly thought of the book, the fifth part of the Order of the Phoenix, Harry's disgust with Dumbledore. That was Voldemort's feeling. Apparently, Dumbledore was worried that he had been discovered by Voldemort, or be seduced by Voldemort. Therefore, if old Dang became the Dark Lord, he would definitely have a much better advantage than Voldemort. The old man smiled and tried many things. It had just been determined that he had become Voldemort's Horcrux, and it was estimated that quite a few plans had been made to reassure this old man. Darren shook his head expressionlessly and said dully, I don't hate Headmaster Dumbledore, I like Headmaster Dumbledore. He is the greatest white wizard of the century. Although I found that Headmaster Dumbledore seemed to have some plans for his brother, I felt that it should be for his brother's own good. Headmaster Dumbledore, like me, was working hard for his brother to survive. Last year, I confronted Voldemort, even though he was once again defeated by his brother. But I knew Voldemort would definitely do it all over again. Headmaster Dumbledore must have known that he was great, admirable, and adored. Ding, father plus 100. Ding, father plus 100. Ding, father plus 100. Ding, father plus 50. Ding, father plus 60. Ding, father plus 80. Ding, father plus 10. A total of 7 father value reminders. Darren was dumbfounded. Can this office provide so many people with the value of the Holy Father? Could it be that the portrait on the wall of Dumbledore's office was provided? But he immediately thought of Harry, who had come with him, and perhaps Ariana had provided him with it. Is the remaining one really provided by the portrait on the wall? But he saw that the portraits of some people above were sleeping, and the others didn't know where they had gone. Could it be that someone is pretending to be asleep? But Darren let go of these doubts. He was still playing the role of a poor kid who had been poisoned. His cloudy eyes looked at Dumbledore. The expression on Dumbledore's face at this point was touched. He wiped his glasses, and there were crystal tears falling from his blue eyes. It's my fault. I never knew this kid adored me like that. He kept everything I did under his eyes, but I was always suspicious of him. My principal doesn't deserve this kid's liking. Dumbledore wiped the tears from his eyes. He eased up for a moment before he sighed and looked at Snape. Severus, the rest is up to you. Maybe I should think about it calmly. You should have been calm a long time ago, Snape said sarcastically. Dumbledore walked deep into the office, where it was impossible to see what the arrangement was. Snape snorted and watched as Dumbledore left. Only then did he take out his wand and walk beside Darren, carefully pressing the tip of his wand against Darren's brain. Forget everything. Ding, sensing that the host is being used to forget everything. Is it counteracted by using 100 father values? Offset. Darren was suddenly happy. Fortunately, Snape forgot nothing about the latest version. It's still so cheap. Episode 181. Trying to bribe the professor. Offset success. Follow the prompts of the system. Darren noticed that he had some more memories in his head. It's all old routines. Darren looked at the memories. Then it turns out that Snape's memory edition is really not very good, because it's a bunch of conversations without nutrition. He spoke particularly well with Dumbledore. They also told a few cold jokes that made Dumbledore laugh. Snape was only responsible for humming twice inside. That seems quite real. At the end of his memory, Dumbledore suddenly had an affair and left early. Now only Snape and he were left, so he only had to say goodbye to Snape and leave. Darren shook his head. Potter, what are you doing sitting here? Snape said coldly. Darren seemed to have reacted just now and quickly stood up. However, in order to brush some of the father's value, he pretended that his legs were weak and sat back down. Yes, I'm sorry, Professor. Scared you. Ding. Father plus 100. Ding. Father plus 100. Ding. Father plus 100. Ding. Snape looked at him. The look is extraordinarily complex. Obviously, he may have frightened the boy, and the boy apologized to him instead. He's the same as Lily. It's hard to bear to say anything serious. It's just that since the child is involved in this matter, he must break up with the boy as soon as possible. He can no longer let his feelings dictate his judgment. This child cannot be associated with him. I thought you were a Slytherin. Not a reckless lion of Gryffindor, but you're always particularly disappointing, Snape said sarcastically. Darren's face immediately turned pale. Professor, I'm sorry, I'll next time. Next time. We'll definitely pay attention. Well, I don't care what method you use to blend into Slytherin, but I still have to warn you, don't let me catch the opportunity. Otherwise I will fire you. Snape's voice grew colder. Darren sensed that what he said was true, and Snape presumably really wanted to expel him and keep him out of the wizarding world. Of course, at this time, he certainly could not know these things, so he showed a look of disbelief. It was evidently never thought that Professor Snape, whom he had always loved, would say such a thing. He opened his mouth, his pale face tugging at Snape's sleeve, his eyes reddened, and he said, Professor. You can punish me for confinement, you can deduct points, can you not fire me? I want to be with my brother. Ding. Father plus 100. Ding. Father plus 100. Ding. Father plus 100. Ding. Snape's heart softened. Even if he used the brain-sealing technique, it could not stop his soft heart from this little cub, but he finally put up with it. He showed a sarcastic expression, then ripped open his sleeve and said sarcastically, it seems that a certain student really has no reverence for the professor, and the Slytherin buckle is very. The next time, I will tell the headmaster that Darren Porter, the brother of our famous Harry Potter, is secretly trying to bribe the professor. By the way, the hand guard you sent me as evidence is still there. Professor, you can't. Darren showed a look of disbelief. Apparently, he did not expect that the Christmas gift he gave to the professor could also serve as evidence of his bribery of the professor. I can, Potter, hope you don't get caught by me for a night tour. Filch has great mercy on you. I won't. I'll catch you all and have the headmaster expel you. Snape rolled up his sleeves. He glanced at the boy one last time. The boy's eyes were a little red, but not as agitated as Snape had imagined. The boy gradually put away the sadness on his face. He suddenly politely revealed to Snape the usual Slytherin fake smile. As you wish, Professor. Huh. Snape turned and left. The tumbling black robe obscured all thoughts. Darren stood inside the headmaster's office, watching in the direction Snape had left. After a while, he withdrew the fake smile on his face, showed a puzzled expression, and said to himself, how can the professor suddenly want me to hate him? I obviously like mine. Could it be that the professor was threatened? Threatened by Voldemort? I wish I could help the professor, but since the professor wanted me to distance myself from him, I obeyed. It's just that the professor is really troublesome. Let me pretend to hate him. He just told me that it was over. Ding. Father plus 100. Ding. Father plus 100. Ding. Father plus 100. Ding. Father plus 100. Ding. Darren's hand obviously touched many people. Just this wave, he did not lose money on this spitting agent. But look at so many father values. Darren remembered Harry and the three of them again. What a awesome. Dumbledore and Snape were hidden in the office. That's also too mysterious, right? Even if Harry's invisibility cloak was strong, it wouldn't be able to do that, right? He was curious, but it was impossible to reveal that he knew all this. So he said hello to the Sorting Hat and played with Fawkes for a while before he came out of Dumbledore's office. As he opened the door, Harry and they quietly followed. After walking completely out of Dumbledore's office, Harry and the others first walked towards Slytherin before hurrying into an empty classroom. They also made a point of observation that there are no portraits here. Phew, scared me to death. Ron lifted the cloak of invisibility. His whole being was exposed. Next up was Hermione. Hermione held a cat in her hand. If Darren were here, he would find out that it was his leather. A pet cat that was once surprisingly lazy and now doesn't see a cat all day. Lazy, where did you steal this invisibility cloak? Which is obviously better than Harry's cloak of invisibility. and was able to conceal it from Dumbledore and Snape. Meow. Lizzie meowed disdainfully, and then it grabbed the invisibility cloak with its mouth and quickly jumped out of the window. Oh my god, this is the 6th floor. Episode 182. Hi Darren, Hermione cried out in concern. She hurried to the window and saw that Richie was running toward the floor of Slytherin with his invisibility cloak. It seems that this should be the invisibility cloak of the Slytherin nobleman. No wonder it works so well. My dad said that there were always some good treasures in those pure-blood families, but unfortunately, there was only one house left in our family. Ron looked enviously in the direction in which Lizzie had left. They would have been sent back to the Gryffindor Tower by Darren, but they were a little uneasy, so they followed again. As they followed, they stumbled upon Lizzie running out of the Slytherin lounge with his invisibility cloak. Harry had an invisibility cloak and certainly knew what it was. Looking at the cloak of invisibility, they suddenly felt that it was better to put on the cloak of invisibility and follow Darren. In this way, even if there is danger, they cannot be detected by the enemy, and then go to the professor as soon as possible. At the very least, it can catch the enemy off guard. So they resorted to a small trick to stop Lizzie. When Lizzie saw them, he was particularly flustered. He even wanted to escape, but Hermione threatened it. If it doesn't borrow them to use the invisibility cloak, they will tell Durenlos to steal the invisibility cloak. Richie agreed. The animals of the wizarding world have some brains, so they were not surprised that Lizzie could understand what they were saying. Putting on the cloak of invisibility that Lizzie had made, they thought that at best they would be able to catch the enemy off guard. As a result, they found that this invisibility cloak was so powerful that it could hide even some of their voices. They passed several professors along the way, undetected. Even if they stomped their feet a little harder, the professors didn't respond. This intrigued them. They also sneaked Darren into Dumbledore's office in their cloak of invisibility. It was just a small experiment. They just think it's funny. Who knew that he had seen such a terrible thing? Dumbledore actually asked Snape to feed Darren the true agent. And the meaning of obedience should be more than once. It should have been fed to Darren before the school started, when Darren was just an ordinary child. This is not right, according to the decree of the Ministry of Magic. I forgot which one it was. Only the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic could use the truth agent on prisoners with everyone's consent. And Dumbledore was obviously committing a crime. Ron said with his wand a little angry. The wand in his hand was still bought for him by Darren. The fact that Dumbledore, whom he admired the most, had done such a thing made him feel extremely uncomfortable. And Snape, the vomit is what he configured. According to Snape, the new version of the true agent was still based on the new version of the antidote researched by Darren, and he used it on Darren. Wolf heart dog lung, bastard. Harry slapped the table hard. It never occurred to him that Darren would have such a life at Hogwarts. Do you remember what Snape said at the end? He had threatened to fire Darren, so why did he do it? He drugged Darren and bullied Darren like this, and I knew he wasn't a good person. Harry angrily walked around the classroom. The wand he held in his hand not as if he wanted to cast a spell, as if he were holding a wooden stick, ready to strike it in Snape's face. That is, he pretended to be very good to you and Darren in front of Dumbledore. In fact, as soon as Dumbledore left, he revealed what kind of person he was. Darren was so good that he even deliberately scolded him, looking at Snape's appearance, almost like killing Darren. Ron followed with certainty. Like Harry, he felt that Snape was lying in front of Dumbledore. In fact, his true face is what he later showed in front of Darren. I never thought that Darren was living this life. Harry sat down on the chair with his head in his arms. Darren always told him that he was doing well, but now, after he had seen it in person next to Darren, he realized that everything was fake. Dumbledore, who was always smiling, would give Darren a spitting agent, and Snape, who seemed to treat Darren favorably, was both a threat and a mockery of Darren. When they bully Darren like this, don't they just look at Darren as a good bully and never think too badly of them? Harry said angrily. Then he thought even more angrily of how Darren had been treated like Snape and had to defend Snape. He had thought that Darren was really angry, and who knew that he was still the same as before. I think, maybe Snape is a good man? Hermione said hesitantly, but there was also some uncertainty in her tone, because Snape really doesn't look like a good guy. But the thought of Snape questioning Dumbledore in her office did seem to be true. Hermione, how could a good person study something like a vomit? Even if it is research, it will not find a way to feed a child's mouth. Ron gritted his teeth. Hermione shook her head hesitantly, and finally decided to ignore the question. Then, at the same time, they had another problem. That is, do you want to tell Darren about it? They don't quite understand what the mysterious man means in Darren. What, maybe Darren might know? But in the end they dropped the idea. Can't tell Darren. Darren was so kind that he would be especially sad. At the beginning of the school year, Darren was too worried about Harry, and finally, the magic riot almost turned into a squib or lost his life. It might be even more sad to know the news again. If there is another magic riot, maybe Darren will really die. For the sake of Darren's life, they unanimously decided to hide the matter from Darren. And Ron added, if Darren had known, he would have been able to conceal the professors and Dumbledore's, and they might have tortured Darren at that time. Because of this sentence, they were more determined to hide Darren's idea. Episode 183. Angry Hermione. Because of Darren's affair, the three of them were still very angry when they returned to the Gryffindor common room. Harry's mood was terrible. When doing his transfiguration work, he always sprinkled ink on the parchment and again took out his wand to remove the ink, and he almost lit the parchment. Boom. It's not just that Harry is in a bad mood. Ron was stunned to find that Hermione was in a worse mood. She slammed the book on the table in the lounge. The book bounced on the table and startled the students around them who were writing homework. I don't know what they're going to do, or what they're talking about mysterious people putting on Harry and Darren, but I knew that it all had to do with the air, and the voice that Harry and Darren could understand was the one that mattered. Dumbledore obviously knew what language it was, and what you could understand the sound, but he just didn't say it. Then we will look it up ourselves, and I believe we will be able to find out who did it. Then trace out what he did with it, and what the voice was. Just arrest the people behind the scenes, and all this will be solved, Hermione said in a low voice. You said it well. The key is that we can't find the black hand behind it at all. Ron grumbled at Hermione. Then he was glared at by Hermione with a look of a fool. It seems easy to think of this culprit. Who the hell hates Darren and Harry the most? Who the hell hates squibs? Who the hell wants to open the Chamber of Secrets the most? Hermione spoke mysteriously in a guiding voice. Ron suddenly realized. He suddenly said, "It's Malfoy." I remembered. What did he say to us that day when the Chamber of Secrets opened? He said the next one is you, Scarhead. Apparently, it must be him. Only Malfoy hated Harry and Darren the most, nor did he like Hermione's identity as a hemp wizard. Malfoy has said more than once that the hemp wizards should all be thrown out of school, so we should report Malfoy to the professors. Harry gritted his teeth and said. However, Hermione refused. No, you forgot that all the professors are under Dumbledore's control. If Dumbledore thought you had listened to Darren and reported Malfoy, would he have taken Darren to the office and fed him the true agent? I've heard that the spit is very harmful to the body, and the reason why the Ministry of Magic disables the spit is that it is likely to cause people to be delirious. Hermione said unhappily, her expression more angry than Harry looked. So what to do? With a few of us, how could it possibly grab Malfoy's horse's feet? Harry scratched his hair irritably. The shock of this day was too great. Especially the great old headmaster did this kind of thing to Darren, which almost affected his 3 views. Of course there are ways. Hermione suddenly chuckled. She glanced cautiously at the students around her, then gathered Ron and Harry together and whispered, my method is not very easy to do. Maybe we may need to violate more than 50 school rules. I'm not afraid, as long as I don't bother Darren. Harry gritted his teeth. Ron nodded too. Hermione continued, all we need to do is come to the Slytherin common room and ask Malfoy a few questions, and not let him recognize us. Huh, how is this possible? Ron rolled his eyes. No, it's possible. Do you remember the compound decoction that Snape mentioned earlier in potions class? We can completely drink the compound decoction, and then turn into 3 other people and go into Slytherin. No one knows it's us. Malfoy may be bragging in Slytherin right now, but unfortunately we can't get in. But Darren is in Slytherin, and if Malfoy brags, he's probably going to hear it. Harry raised his doubts. No, Darren was always too simple. For example, if Malfoy says that he has done a big thing, we will think that he did something bad, and Darren will think that he helped the professor with his work. Darren didn't like to think badly of people, just as Snape had done to him, and he still felt that Snape was deliberate, or the kind that was good for him. How could you expect Darren to be able to analyze more of the bad things Malfoy had said about him? Hermione said analytically. Ron and Harry nodded convincingly at the same time. There was nothing wrong with Hermione's analysis, and Darren couldn't have imagined that much. So, now there's one question left. Snape said that the powerful potion, which had the compound decoction written on it, was in the library's forbidden book section. How can we get this book? If you want a book in the forbidden area, you must get the autograph of a professor, Hermione asked somewhat anxiously. Why not let Darren go? Darren approached Professor McGonagall and said that he needed to check the information in order to study other medicines. Ron asked excitedly, but he was immediately stunned by Harry and Hermione. Yeah, and then Darren was just about to get an autograph and was called into Dumbledore's office the same day and then fed him the true agent? Hermione said angrily. Ron thought for a moment and then said, why don't you go find Lockhart? I think Lockhart likes to sign autographs. Good idea. Well said. Hermione and Harry praised at the same time. Darren naturally didn't know what Harry was discussing behind their backs. He was rummaging through boxes and cabinets in his bedroom looking for his Grim Reaper invisibility cloak. According to his thoughts, with the exception of the Cloak of Death's invisibility, Harry couldn't possibly do that kind of thing. Sure enough, he rummaged through the place where the invisibility cloak had been placed before, and it was empty. So Harry, they used his Grim Reaper invisibility cloak. It's just, who took it? Dumbledore? No, if Dumbledore had taken it, he would have doubted life, doubted the Cloak of Invisibility or Harry's, which was the Deathly Hallows. So, Snape? No way, Snape would never have given Harry the invisibility cloak. Just by Harry's looks, Snape can be responsible for Harry's life, which is his greatest love for the goddess. So, episode 184, who stole his invisibility cloak? Wondering who had taken it, Darren washed up and lay down on the bed to pretend to sleep. This is also reasonable. After all, he had exhausted his strength in the eyes of outsiders today, and had been fed the true agent in Dumbledore's office. and even had been impounded by Snape. It's normal to fall asleep as soon as you come back, and just when Darren was almost literally falling asleep, he heard a footstep. It's Lizzie. Just when Darren thought he was waiting for the wrong man. How could a cat do such a thing? As a result, the sound of his cabinet opening was heard. It was the cabinet where his invisibility cloak was placed. Then a furry fellow jumped to his bed and carefully slipped into his arms. Boy, he called out to the good guys. This guy even stole his invisibility cloak? I don't know if Harry let him steal it or if he stole it himself. Darren was inclined to steal it himself. Then today may have been seen by Harry. And this is what happened today. It's just that he just can't understand. What is this guy doing with his invisibility cloak? In addition, with the cloak of invisibility, it can be found. Is it in your mouth? So who is this for? System, this guy can't be animagus, right? Ding. To answer this question, it takes 100 father values. Buckle. It's really key. Ask a question and deduct the value of the father. It's okay, not much. Ding, Raz is not animagus. No, that's the real cat. But why did this cat steal his invisibility cloak? System, why don't you tell me? What did it do to steal the cloak of invisibility? Ding, 500 father values. Buckle. Ding, Lizzie lent the cloak of invisibility to a man to wear. I'll go. This is a thief. He eats and drinks well. Well, although he didn't raise it, this guy also lay on him for so many days, and as a result, he stole his invisibility cloak for others to wear. To whom was it lent? Answer questions below 1,000, casually buckle. Ding, need to deduct 10,000 Holy Father value. Too much. Who is this? Is it worth 10,000 Holy Fathers? Forget it. Is that person bad for me? Ding, this question, the system can answer for free. The system will not put the host in danger. What happens around the host? The system has a unique algorithm to ensure the safety of the host. It seems that the system believes that the fact that Lizzie stole his cloak of invisibility will not cause harm to him, which never reminds him and allows things to develop. So, last question. Is it male or female with my invisibility cloak? Ding, is a woman. If it was a lady, it would be acceptable, but the broken cat stealing his invisibility cloak was too much. This thing has to be punished. For example, slaughtered this cat? Ding, the host can use the father value to exchange the simulated cat in the system, and after replacing the real cat, it has the form, action, and appearance of the real cat. It is even possible to make a simple logical thought. Whether to use the 10,000 fathers value exchange? 10,000? Why not grab it? But it's really not safe to keep a cat with only its own ideas. Forget it, redeem it. Darren sighed. Then a cat like Lizzie appeared in front of him. As for the original cat, it has been eaten into the belly of the simulated cat at this time. Good guys, is that the alternative? Meow meow. It's really like that. Well, there is no need to change the behavior of Lizzie before. If there is anything to pay attention to, I will inform you. The next period of time, Darren found life calm again. The professors didn't seem to know anything about the basilisk. At best, let them go to school and team up. But Slytherin had always been like that, so for Darren, the only suspicious thing that hadn't changed much was that Harry, they seemed to have a little secret. From time to time, one of them has a guy out to do something, but never told Darren. Darren had heard Percy complain, and they seemed to be appearing frequently in the girls' bathroom. Darren suspects they may be boiling a combination decoction. I plan to run to Slytherin and ask Malfoy, as in the original. It's just that Darren just can't understand. Why don't they ask him? Did he think he was too holy to see that everything was good? But if he couldn't understand the things, Darren didn't bother to think about it. Today is the Harry Quidditch game. According to the description of the original book, poor Harry was going to be admitted to the school infirmary today. Once again grateful to Professor Snape for his decision not to let him into the Quidditch team. By the way, he also thanked him for not being a savior and not having to be chased and beaten by Dobby. He looked at the Gryffindor team. Everyone on the team, including Harry, had a dignified look. Because all Slytherin was holding the Wheel of Light 2001, while everyone in Gryffindor except Harry was holding an old broomstick. To quote Slytherin Quidditch captain Flint, that's where you can put it in the museum. Flint was the one who had last scolded Darren for being a Slytherin disgrace, and he had also scolded Hermione for being a mud seed. However, in the end, he was forced by Darren to apologize in a hushed manner, which allowed him to walk out of the Quidditch stadium safely. Of course, I don't know why, but the aura of bad luck seemed to be hanging over Flint's body. He was unlucky to do anything during this time. The prefect rejects him, the professor lectures him, the sister taunts him, and even the buildings at Hogwarts are always in trouble when he comes. A few days ago, he was smashed by a pair of armor and broke his leg, entered the school doctor's office for 2 days, and finally came out yesterday. However, he was strong enough to compete in Quidditch. After all, with this latest broom that their whole Slytherin had taken, Flint didn't think they could lose. He glared at Darren viciously, then said angrily, "Look at how I beat Gryffindor." Darren skimmed like a mouth. Defeat is defeat, as for talking to him, but his people can't collapse. So he smiled and said, "It's all right, as long as you don't use bad methods and win by your own strength. How can I be angry?" Ding, father plus 20, ding, father plus 30, ding, father plus 30, ding. Not angry is not angry, but Darren feels that he can't win. After all, the savior Harry Potter basically rarely loses to Quidditch. Even if you lose in the early stage, you will definitely win back in the end. and if you want to win the protagonist, it is better to be the protagonist in the next life. Darren laughed politely. Then his eyes were on Quidditch Stadium, where Gryffindor was already waiting. As for Harry, he waved nervously at Darren, who still didn't know what bad luck he would face later. In other words, Dobby, this creature is a little fierce, really can't kill Voldemort. He plans to kill Harry. He really couldn't stand Dobby's brain circuitry. Darren, who was once again thankful that he was not a savior, saw that the Quidditch tournament would begin with Harry staying in the school infirmary. Episode 185. Want his little life? Harry felt he had had enough. He found that every time he played a Quidditch game, he was always caught in all sorts of troubles. Of course, maybe he was exaggerating, because it doesn't count every time, but for Harry, it really wasn't much different. Just last year, when he first went to Quidditch competition, Quirrell cast a curse on him, causing him to almost fall off his broom. The second time was when Snape was the referee, and in order not to be messed with by Snape, he ended the game within 2 minutes. Later in the Quidditch competition at the end of the semester, because he encountered Voldemort and lay in the school infirmary, he missed it perfectly. Until this year, he had thought that the Slytherin Quidditch team all took the light round of 2001, which was the biggest bad news. Who knew that just at the beginning of the Quidditch game, it started to rain, and when the wind and rain were over, a wandering ball stared at him. In order to win, he turned down Darren's help, and cursed and swore that he would be safe and sound, and get the golden snitch as fast as he could. It's just that his idea was frustrated, because just when he paused for a second to catch the golden snitch, the wandering ball smashed his arm very hard. Of course, this is not the most tragic. Worst of all, when he saw Darren running over with a pale face, he was thinking about how to explain it, but he didn't notice Lockhart's approach. The guy had sucked the bones out of his arms. As he lay in bed in the school doctor's office, Harry couldn't believe he could be so unlucky. It was okay, but because he was so miserable, Darren was not angry, just pale, and his body trembled for a while. Harry thought that he might as well let Darren get angry and scold him, at least he would feel much better. Darren walked out of the school infirmary with a smile in his eyes. Because the expression was not quite right, Ron and Hermione thought he was too scared and forced him back to Slytherin. Back at Darren in the Slytherin common room, he had planned to go straight back to sleep. Who knew Flint suddenly stopped him? Flint is the captain of the Slytherin Quidditch team. He also shouted to Darren in the morning that he could beat Gryffindor. It turns out that I haven't played it now. Supposedly, this guy should have gone back to his bedroom and sulked. But to Darren's surprise, instead of going back to sulking, Flint walked next to Darren with a smile and said, "I know a secret of your brother. Do you dare to go to the Black Lake outside the castle in the middle of the night to wait for me? If you don't go, I'll kill your brother's secret next time." Ding, sensing that there is a scene of the Holy Father system playing around the host, now release a temporary task, ask with a worried expression, "What is the secret?" "If you have anything to do with me, if you dare to move my brother, I will certainly not let you go. And promise to go alone to the Black Lake outside the castle after midnight." Ding, after the task is completed, get the forged card ×1. Does the host receive the task? Forged cards? What's that? And what does the Flint guy want to do? Was the game lost ready for Ju and Chewin to beat him? But is he still afraid of that? Access. So Darren immediately showed a panicked expression. He grabbed Flint by the collar, and said angrily, "What the hell are you going to do? You have something coming at me, and you don't want to hurt my brother. Isn't it for you? You say you can't go and wait by the Black Lake outside the castle? If you go, then wait until after midnight and you leave a note in your bedroom. Say you're going to go for a walk and then leave the castle and reach the Black Lake outside the castle. If you don't dare, it's all right, just sit in the lounge and wait for the day when I kill your brother's secret." Flint smiled triumphantly. Darren wanted to despise him. Harry Potter has Dumbledore staring at him every day, and it is a fantasy that he can be killed by random people. It's weird if this guy can do it. Still, he resisted the idea of complaining. Instead, with a prayerful expression, he said, I'm definitely going to the Black Lake, so can you tell me what that secret is? And can you spare my brother? You can do whatever you want me to do." His voice trembled, his tone choked, and he was obviously terrified. But this fear was not because he was going to the Black Lake, but because he was worried about Harry Potter's life. Even Flint was slightly stunned, but he immediately showed a proud expression. How could it possibly tell you now? Wait until you get to the Black Lake in the middle of the night." The expression on his face was particularly ill-intentioned. Obviously something bad came to mind, but Darren nodded firmly. Finally, he waited in the dormitory until midnight. With a pen, he quickly wrote on the paper that he was going out to relax. Then with a look of trepidation on his face, he slipped out of the Slytherin lounge and the castle was eerie in the middle of the night. Some places are pitch black. Only Filch's office was lit up. Darren hesitated, but decided not to alarm Filch and walked away from the side. Darren had thought the castle gates were closed, and he might need to open them himself. As a result, he found that a crack had opened in the castle's gate. Apparently, Flint, or the person who really wanted to see him, should already be out. There were already a dozen people standing on the edge of the Black Lake, and Darren glanced at it, all Slytherin students. It was also the people who hated him the most. Is this going to give him a solicitation? Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a forged card ×1. Forged cards. The host can use the forged cards to change the fact that it has occurred over a period of time and forge the scene that the host wants. This? Sounds like a very useful look. Of course, the most important thing now is to know what these people really think. Was he brought out to kill him, or was he meant to teach him a lesson? The consequences of the two will be different. It determines the fate of these people. Although he has the Holy Father system, isn't there no one else here but these people? They were all killed. Was he the Holy Father, or did he say it? Darren smiled. The smile is very simple. I'm coming. Can you tell me what is my brother's secret? Please, just spare my brother and let me do whatever I want. Ding, father +10. Ding, father +5. Ding, father +1. Ding. Darren was dumbfounded. What's the situation? He said so sincerely. These people actually gave this divine father value? Was this really intended to kill him?